I'm not in love. It's a song of denial. Anyway, I approach View Cinema, and I have very mixed feelings going to see the movie I'm seeing. Oh, hello, it's the Elemental poster. I see they switched it around. There was a Guardians of the Galaxy poster. I guess they switched it up a bit. I'm actually looking forward to Pixar's Elemental, assuming it's going to be good. Pixar movies are usually good. Anyway, here I am, View Cinema. I remember seeing the first Guardians of the Galaxy film. Up there were posters of like the main characters. There's the Guardians of the Galaxy thing. I remember, and I have fond memories of this. Seeing the film, we absolutely loved that. Absolutely adored it. We only complained about the villain. That was it. I enjoyed the Volume 2. Arguably better. Volume 3, hearing mixed things about it, but I'll talk more about it later.
Why are we still here? Just to suffer?
No, not the beast!
Every night.
Not the beast!
I can feel my neck and my heart.
So I'm an expert at controlling my anger because I do it infinitely more than you.
The body I've lost. The comrades I've lost. Won't stop hurting. It's like they're all still there.
See, but I come from a time when movies were filmed.
You feel it too, don't you?
You've got to do better, Senator. You've got to.
Amusement park films.
I'm gonna make them give back our past.
What does the plant say?
I'm Groot.
I'm Groot. I am Groot. Let's plant him here. Let's just have baby Groot stare at your soul in the entire review. Alright. Get the camera up and running. Hey Groot, can you help me with the camera? Here. Come on, Groot. Yeah, just stay staring at the audience's souls. Anyway, hello everybody, God bless you all, ScotsThinker here, and welcome to my official review of Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. You know, it's been a long, mostly fun ride all these years. Not just for Marvel, but also for the Guardians of the Galaxy. I remember when the first Guardians of the Galaxy movie came out, almost nobody that I knew of had ever heard of them. They were this lowbrow, like bottom of the barrel type heroes as far as the Marvel lineup was concerned. Pardon me for burping earlier. And no one was expecting them to be a phenomenon, but there you go. They had their own movie and bam, they just became quite the pop culture icons of their own, and they became these really obscure people, and then suddenly they became really popular and everyone wanted to dress up as them, cosplay them. Everyone was saying, I'm Groot. Everyone was putting on the Peter Quill's awesome mix in in other places like the cinemas and the bowling places. They became a culture phenomenon. And how would I rate the other two Guardians of the Galaxy movies? I would probably give Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 1 a 10.5 out of 12, I'd say. Because the movie overall was really good quality. The only problem with that film was the villain, and that was almost pretty much it. That was the consensus then, it's the consensus now. There was also Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, which I think was even better. mainly because it had an even better villain. I would probably give Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 a 10.7 out of 12, I think. Yeah. So, what did I think of Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3? Well, we'll talk about that, but before we do, I wanted to talk about the state that the MCU is in. Because ever since Endgame, Marvel Cinematic Universe has been going in a very slow decline in terms of their quality, with the exception of some ups such as Spider-Man No Way Home, despite its flaws, and debatedly some of the first initial impressions of the Marvel TV shows before people started noticing their flaws. People had started to become quite tired of the MCU, and people also started seeing some moral flaws in the entire narrative as a whole, including myself. And in Phase 4, there seemed to be this push towards prioritizing this pandering and the messaging and all kinds of jumbled messes that just didn't quite work in the same way that previous Marvel films did. See, even when the previous MCU movies were at their most mediocre to bad, people still watched those movies because there was always a sense that the narrative as a whole was being constructed, and one of the main reasons people kept coming back was the characters, and people really like the characters of Guardians of the Galaxy. The director, James Gunn, loves these characters, and James Gunn has clearly got a lot of creative freedom when it came to his movie, for better or for worse, but we'll get to that later. The point is that the saga reached a definitive high, and people were satisfied with that. There's a few films that can arguably be used to wrap up what came before, including No Way Home, arguably, as well as this movie. And sorry, out the camera again. I'm brute. Look at you. No. There we go. There we go. Okay. So the MCU started dipping in quality. It was mainly because they were trying to form a new saga from the ground up, but they were getting a bit too complicated with their lore. They probably should have just started from the ground up, and this phase should really have been about having some epilogue after effect of what happened in Endgame, which they did do for a lot of the time, but they also had these attempts at making a new saga which just haven't worked, because there's these narrative clashes, such as the way they're trying to introduce these new characters, and they're just not as likable as the ones that came before. There's all this woke pandering, which have really alienated the audiences. There's this panderous attempt at acknowledging, hey, here's this thing from the comics, or hey, here's this thing to get excited from the next product, and don't question it, please. And the overall results can get from bad to just awful. Like, Thor: Love and Thunder made me legitimately angry, and Wakanda Forever, despite how much they tried to hype it up, was a mess of a plot with a lot of inconsistencies. But I've already talked about those movies at length. Now, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, given just how the mighty have fallen in regards to the MCU, I had really mixed feelings going into Guardians of the Galaxy 3. I didn't know what to expect, but I heard people saying it's better. But when I eventually saw it, I actually really enjoyed it.
Finally!
Finally! Finally! Thank you, James Gunn! Thank you, whoever is responsible for this decision. If it's not James Gunn, if it's James Gunn and several other people at Disney, Marvel, thank you! Finally, a great Marvel movie without a bunch of woke bullshit politics in it. Thank you! Finally a happy fan!
I had a good time. The humor was actually legitimately funny this time, and I heard other people in the audience actually laughing this time compared to Love and Thunder. And this film gets pretty dark and intense, which I really admired. And overall, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 doesn't really match up to Guardians of the Galaxy 1 and 2, but Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 is miles better than most, if not the whole of MCU Phase 4 except for No Way Home. The sad thing is that this film is no longer in Phase 4. This is just in the first half of Phase 5 now. So this is basically like the equivalent of No Way Home for Phase 5. And given the direction where the MCU is going, especially bringing back everyone's least favorite Marvel character, Captain Marvel, I'm sorry, I don't see the MCU going in a positive direction. Maybe Deadpool versus Wolverine in Phase 6, but apart from that, I don't think there's much of a bright future for the MCU, but I suppose I'll talk more about that later. What did I think of this movie here? So, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 actually leaves off from where the holiday special came in. That's another complaint about the MCU. As it is right now, they put too much faith in this idea that the fans are gonna keep up with every single tedious television show and as well as every movie. I suppose it can't be too easy, but I think where this film leads off with James Gunn's direction is actually handled pretty well, because there's a few mentions to what happened in the holiday special, and they're the little mentions and they don't distract from the overall plot. So I think that's the major difference. The way the continuation works in Volume 3 is that people can pick up on the pieces, whereas in all the other MCU stuff, they expect you to have seen this and that, and it can get a bit disorientating to keep up with. Not impossible, just disorientating. And where this movie begins is that the Guardians of the Galaxy have formed their base in nowhere. It's literally called Nowhere. And already the tone seems to be taking itself more seriously than the other two, because the Guardians have some personal issues to deal with. Star-Lord is having to deal with the fact that the Gamora he used to know is literally dead, and due to some time travel mishaps in the events of Endgame, the original Gamora is alive, but this version of Gamora has no memories of the romance that she had with Peter Quill. So that leads to some tragic tension there. Although, one of the complaints that I've heard people like Dave Cullen make is that Gamora is way too harsh on Star-Lord. Like, I get it. She's used to be an assassin, and she used to be a jerk before coming to the Guardians. But there's a scene where she pushes Peter onto some laptops quite aggressively.
But she does push him up against a console. And you have to think about this. The kind of twisted morality of these films. Why doesn't anyone call her out for acting like a violent psychopath? What kind of a message does this communicate? Why doesn't she get locked up for this? Have we audiences become so numb to this kind of thing that we're just fine with ignoring it? She screams at him psychotically, saying she doesn't give a shit about his Gamora. And because no one calls her out for her completely unjustified violent outburst, In my view, this indirectly and casually enables her domestic violence against Peter. But what's really sad is the fact that this isn't the original Gamora. This is the 2014 version that we saw at the end of Endgame, because the original Gamora was killed in Infinity War. So this version is basically from the past. Therefore, she has no memory of her time with the Guardians, and certainly no memory of her romantic relationship with Peter Quill. So Peter spends a lot...
And it's the kind of scene where Dave Cullen points out, if this were Peter Quill doing this to Gamora, there would be an uproar. But they allow Gamora a pass all because she does it to a man. Double standards. I suppose there are some other inconsistencies throughout the plot, but I'll get to that later. But basically, the Guardians come under attack from this guy who was hinted at the end of Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, Adam Warlock, played by, who I swear I think is that kid from the Voyage of the Dawn Treader Narnia adaptation. So Adam causes some trouble, and even though Adam is almost useless in the overall plot, to the point of he didn't really need to be there, he does nevertheless create the inciting incident where Rocket the Raccoon is critically injured, and as they're trying to do an operation on him, it turns out that due to experimentations on Rocket, he has some kind of kill switch on his heart. So they need to travel across the galaxy to find the code necessary to revive Rocket properly. And so all the friends from the vast regions of God's created space all go on a journey to help out their friend, because the Guardians of the Galaxy, just like the crew of Cowboy Bebop, albeit unorthodox, these misfits have formed a family and they really care about each other. So go through all kinds of adventures and other mishaps, and the film goes into Rocket's past with these flashbacks. These flashbacks are really provoking. Not only do we get to delve further into the main villain's plan, and this villain is also leagues better than from the likes of Kang, from what I've heard. Although the villain's melodrama can be quite funny at times.
I think this switch makes that thing turn on.
How did you figure that out?
You claim to be a god, yet you couldn't figure that out?
I am a god! I can tell the difference between tea and other stuff.
This is tea, right?
Down the sorrows of being outsmarted by a raccoon!
Yeah, I'm pretty much just playing around, but basically, I suppose to be fair, the villain is melodramatic because he has this god complex to the point of being on the brink of insanity. We also get insight into Rocket the Raccoon's past and why he's so agitated to the point of not liking the title of Raccoon. We get to see his past friends, and there's even this really emotional scene where Rocket the Raccoon has this near-death experience, and people told me they cried during that scene. Just this heartfelt notion of Rocket having so much pain and then making it to the other side just warms people's hearts. And despite how grim these can be, I like how there's humor added into the overall movie as well. Although people have complained that this can make for some very drastic tonal shifts, especially when people complain, just let a serious scene play out, enough of the gags. Yeah, maybe if there was another redraft, I think there could have been a better balance between the themes and the humor. I've heard other people say, there's some other ideas, but they never really allow them to develop as much. I suppose for the most part, I could let it slide, but I'll have to dwell further on this. There's definitely fun moments, and the characters all get their moments to shine and to grow, some better than others, but I think even though people can be alienated by the humor, I was laughing for the most part. There are some legitimately funny moments, as well as some great set pieces, and I just want to say thank you, God, and thank you, James Gunn, for there existing a recent Marvel movie that doesn't have all that woke, the like severe woke nonsense, such as the females being far better than the males, whereas in this film, males and females are pretty much equals. And I mean, some could say that it's in there, but in small doses. And due to the way this film is laid out and written, it's got a far better sense of appeal that can reach out to a broader audience. So for that, I'm very thankful. And this film does have some great ideas, as well as some great concepts to juggle around with, as well as some great action set pieces. A lot of people have been complimenting this one action scene that's in a corridor. Although, for all the major ups that this film has, and believe me, they are miles better than most of the Marvel content we've been having in recent years, it's the film has some inconsistencies, some very inconsistent plot inconsistencies, such as what happened to Peter Quill's signature mask and rocket equipment? That sure would have come in handy during one particular scene. I guess they just removed it just for the sake of Adam Warlock having a purpose. That's another thing. Adam Warlock, despite being built up in the previous movie, and despite creating the inciting incident, is almost pretty much useless in the entire film. Like, he doesn't really contribute that much. And there aren't many scenes in there. This isn't like Death from Puss in Boots, where he's an ominous villain and his threat is in the background. No, he's just this villain who, I mean, he seems to have the same powers as Captain Marvel and presumably has some regenerative qualities, but he doesn't have that great of a development because the film never really gives him that much time to develop. In fact, you could remove Adam Warlock from the film, as well as give Peter Quill back his mask and rocket equipment, and the film wouldn't change that much. Like, Adam Warlock doesn't really contribute anything. Other things worth noting. There are some other plot inconsistencies, but for the most part, if you're looking for a fun film in which your favorite characters can have some satisfying conclusions, then yeah, I would recommend watching Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. It's not perfect, but it's far better than what we've been getting recently. And this is probably spoiling it, but I like how this film ends with everybody dancing. You know, it's a little slice of heaven, everybody getting up to dance and just having a good time. I suppose it's like the finales of like Ella Enchanted and Shrek. You know, you have all these characters together, they're laughing, they're dancing, they're having fun, even in spite of all their trials and turmoils. And the characters have some pretty satisfying conclusions, even though the way they conclude their character arcs isn't that well built up throughout the films either, although other people would say they are. Honestly, I think this film stands out in its own right in such a way where I think all of the MCU could just be finished right here. If you were to binge the entire MCU with some friends at a sleepover, just go through like the entire Infinity Saga. You can skip Captain Marvel if you want. And then after Endgame, you can just simply watch like No Way Home, despite its concerning flaws, and then you can watch Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, and then just call it a day. Because honestly, I don't think the MCU is going in a positive direction. James Gunn clearly has talent of being a director, and there's a reason why DC is looking forward to having James Gunn back in their filmmaking crew. It's clear that James Gunn loves the material he's been given with and has a respect for his audience, even if he doesn't always produce the best product. And the same can't be said for most people who are being hired for the MCU these days. They've been indoctrinated with all this like modern political rubbish that gives them a sense of self-entitlement, but they never really consider any ways of engaging with the fans properly. So the future lineups coming up, such as the Marvels, it doesn't really look promising. So I'm glad that Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, at the very least, even despite its flaws, could have some sense of conclusion. And you know what? With all that said, I think I'm done with the MCU. It's been a fun ride. But I legitimately think that unless these filmmakers and storytellers can really create some, how do I say it? Reimagining? Refreshing takes on superheroes, like with Joker or the Batman, or with what I've been hearing from what James Gunn has been creating, or with Invincible, or with The Boys from what I'm hearing, or with Daredevil. Like, unless the superhero genre can get back to that kind of quality of storytelling constantly, then I think I'm pretty much done with stuff like the MCU. I mean, don't get me wrong, done with superheroes? I'll keep going back to superhero stuff. I mean, just because a certain era of films comes and goes, that doesn't mean we can't go back to certain stories that we really love. I mean, all throughout filmmaking history, you had these different phases of these different genres. Back in the from the late 40s all the way to the 60s, you had your musicals. From the 60s all the way to the 70s, you have your westerns, cowboy westerns. From 70s, 80s, 90s, you got your sci-fi fare, and then there would be what people would call like the Harry Potter generation, and then came along the superhero generation of the MCU, which started in 2008 and has kept going to this day. But I think there's going to be some new movies up and coming, or a new generation of movies. Like, I think the Super Mario Brothers movie, with the success that movie has had, I think that's going to set a trend for video game adaptations, especially with the praise that video game adaptations such as Arcane and the Sonic movies, and to an extent Netflix's Castlevania, has been receiving. I think we're entering an era of video game adaptations. Possibly. I legitimately think that the era of the comic book heroes is coming to an end. And as of right now, unless the MCU can really get back to their quality storytelling, I think I'm done with the MCU. I could be wrong, but I legitimately think Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 is going to be the last time I'll ever go to the cinema to see a Marvel movie. It's funny, it took this long for the fatigue to take its toll, but given the direction that I was going, yeah, there's no point in being a dead horse. I'm done. How do I rate Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3? I'd say I'd give it an... how about an 8.5 out of 12. Now, when I put movies like the Mario Brothers movie that I did into the category of 8, I usually describe them as movies that are worth seeing despite their flaws. That's how I would define them. If you want to see what my opinions were on some previous installments in the MCU, feel free to subscribe to the channel. And what did you like about Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3? Let's see if we can have a discussion in the comment section down below. So, everybody get dancing. Gotta build God's kingdom somehow, eh? Come on, dance, Groot. Dance. Alright. ScotsThinker signing out.